Hi, everyone. If you do not know me, my name is Lori Dubois. I own a company called Marketing Troubadour. A troubadour is a storyteller, and I have been telling stories and marketing and branding for many, many years. I work with small businesses to help you all tell your story, and that is so important. Now, I have a branding presentation that I would like to present, and it's about 30 minutes long. If you're watching this at a later date and time, right now it's April 2020, and so this is the pandemic time. We are going to talk about marketing during a pandemic. I just created a guide called Marketing in a Pandemic, and it's available on my website, on the blog, or the homepage. And in it, it talks about doing a brand review, and there's a link to this recording, which is probably how you found this. I will be sharing my screen and going through this branding presentation because I think it's really important and can give you a different kind of a structure and framework to look at your branding with, so that you realize branding is a big thing, and it is not the same as marketing. So I will be sharing my screen here. I will be also getting rid of you having to look at me, and all you have to look at is the slides. So this presentation is called Branding Reimagined, Unlocking the Secrets to Building a Complete Brand. The reason it matters is because a lot of times we think of our brand as one particular thing, and that can be very small. But I have created this framework that says if you have a complete brand, then you have all the parts of a story that you're going to be able to tell. So first, you're seeing a picture of a brand as in a branding iron. And when I say brand, what do you think of? When I ask this question, these are some of the answers I often get. Your brand is your name. Your brand is your logo. Your brand is really your identification, what identifies you to the marketplace. Branding is marketing. A brand is a promise. No, a brand is really your reputation. Well, it's your image in the marketplace. And a lot of times people will say the brand represents ownership. And the reason ownership is last, and it's in all caps, is because typically when we have just the branding iron like this, that is why these brands were originally created, because if we were branding cattle, this brand would show that that cow is mine because it's got my brand, and that other cow over there is yours because it has your brand. So the branding does talk about ownership. But when we're talking about marketing and branding and your business brand, really, what is it? I like to say your brand is your story, and marketing is telling that story. Okay, so you have to have a story, and then you have to be able to tell it, because if nobody hears it and nobody knows who you are, you really don't have a business. So when I talk to small business owners, a lot of times they'll be talking about challenges they have. And so the question is that a marketing challenge or is that a branding challenge? And the reason it's important is so you know where to work on. So if someone says they don't know if they're talking to the right people, they may think that's a marketing problem, and sometimes it can be. But in reality, that is a branding problem, and you'll see why here in a few minutes. If someone says, I'm ready to market, but I don't know what to say, that's also a branding problem. If your marketing feels inconsistent and fragmented, like it doesn't match and it just feels like it doesn't go together, that's also a branding problem. All my stuff looks completely different from each other. What should I look like? Branding problem. I'm afraid I look and sound like everyone else. Sometimes I think we all think this is the kiss of death. We've got to be different from our competitors or nobody will choose us. Well, once again, that's a branding problem. So as we go through this, I think you'll understand why these are branding problems. And if you can solve them, when it comes time to do your marketing, you will be much more successful because you'll have clarity. So I said, your brand is your story. And if I say, what's your story? Do I just mean, what are the written words? Chapter 1, once upon a time, I started a business. No, when I talk about your story, I'm talking about your big story. So if my husband came home and said, "Oh, I met this guy today. His name's Brian. I really think you should meet him." I might say, "Oh, really? What's his story?" Well, I don't care what Brian's address is or what his birthday is or some of those things that are the data that might go into what you might think is a story. I mean, what's his story? What's he about? Why should I care? Why would I want to meet him? So when we're talking about your story, it's a much bigger thing. So several years ago, a colleague and I created what we call the branding pie. And we talk about what's in a brand. And as you can see, there are 5 pieces in a brand. And we're going to go through these. And the very first piece of the brand is core values. And so obviously this is what you value. Now, why would core values be part of your brand? I think that sometimes people might agree that it's important, some may not, but why would they go in your brand? Well, here's a short list of things that are some core values, and there are hundreds and hundreds of core values. If you're ever interested, you can look them up online and do a little exercise where you go through and you identify maybe your top 20 core values. And then I would challenge you to cut that to 10, and then to cut that even further to 3 to 5 core values. Some of the values you see here: integrity, teaching, fun, faith, knowledge, relationships, and yes, making money is on here too. So you don't have to feel guilty about what your core values are. You just need to identify them. And why do we want them in our brand? Because it helps differentiate you from your competition. That also helps attract the right people to you. So when you think about the companies you do business with, don't you want to work with a company who has the same core values as you do? A lot of times we won't do business with someone because they have a core value that we do not believe in and we don't want to support them. So identifying your core values and making them part of your brand helps people to know if it's a fit to work with you and how you might be different than someone else doing the same thing as you. They may have different core values. The other thing is it also helps serve as a barometer for making decisions. So when you're making decisions in your business, marketing or otherwise, knowing your core values can help you decide if that's the right decision or not. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of Simon Sinek. You can see his picture right here on the screen and also his name. He has written a book called Start With Why, which is an excellent book. I highly recommend it. And he also has a TED Talk, which for years has been one of the top 20 viewed TED Talks. And he talks about why your why is so important. He says most people, everyone knows what they do. Most people can explain how they do it, but very few people can explain why they do it. And he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And this quote is from Simon, and he says, any person or organization can explain what they do. Some can explain how they are different or better, but very few can clearly articulate why. So this is a very important thing for your brand, and that's why your core values belong in it. So now we have the core values being the first piece of the brand, and we move on to the next piece of the brand, which is actually the products or services you have and who your customers are. So we've got what you value, we just talked about, and now we have what you sell and to whom. Why do these go together, and why are these in your brand? I think that a lot of times people think, I know what I sell. I sell hiking boots or I sell bicycles. So why do I have to actually define that in my brand? The reason is when you look at what you're selling and to whom, look at the comparisons of some of these companies, Apple versus Dell. They both make computers, right? So why does it matter? Well, they both do sell computers, but they are very different companies and they have very different brands. I think you would agree. Starbucks versus McDonald's. You can buy a cup of coffee at either one of these places, but their brands are very different. Smart Water versus Brita. Same thing. They're both talking about selling water, but their brands are different. And also Amazon versus Whole Foods. Think of how different they are. Wait, what? Amazon? Whole Foods? Amazon just bought Whole Foods not that long ago. So although their brands have originally been very different, I think we're seeing, and we will continue to see, more illustrations of how their brands are going to become more similar. So when we're talking about who you are selling to, the reason we talk about it in your brand is because every piece of your brand you work on is related to and tied to who your ideal customer is and how you're talking to them. So a lot of times when we're working on marketing campaigns, people will ask you questions about who is this targeted to, who are you talking to, and you know that's an appropriate question. But the problem is if you wait until you're doing your marketing campaign to worry about who your ideal customer is, you may have missed the boat in other parts of your brand, right? So what I like to call one of my Troubadour truisms is, not everyone is your client. This is so important to know. Could everyone potentially buy from you? Maybe, probably not, but maybe. But the point is, you don't want to talk to everyone, because when you're talking to everyone, you're essentially talking to no one. The more broad your population becomes that you're addressing, the more you have to water down your message, and it's not focused on what people need to hear. So developing your ideal customer avatar, often called an ICA, is very important for your brand. And usually what you do is start with demographics. And demographics are the kind of things like income level, gender, age, geographic location, job title, all of those kind of things that can identify who might do business with you. But to have a really clear and narrow ICA, you need to go a little bit deeper. Go beyond the demographics into the psychographics. And the psychographics are things like behaviors and attitudes and lifestyles. And those are the kind of things that really start to tweak that definition to the people who might be a perfect fit for you. And then I like to add this last category of other important characteristics to you, meaning only you. It's your business, so you get to choose who your ideal customer is. So if your ideal customer pays their bills on time, you want to put that in your list, because that may be very important to you. If they value advice from an outside consultant and you are a consultant, that would be very important to you. So all of these things together make up your ICA. Now here's just a quick example of how to refine and narrow your ICA. You may start with saying, I serve business owners. Well, that's a pretty large group, and that could be very difficult. If you're talking to all business owners, you're going to have to be pretty generic. So you might narrow it and say, oh, I serve small business owners. A little bit more defined, but still a very large group. Let's define it and refine it more. Female small business owners. Okay, now we're definitely seeing that this could be messaged in a certain way, but let's get even deeper. Female small business owners in alternative healthcare. Okay, this gives you some identifiers of some specific ways you might message to this group. But can we even get more defined? Sure we can. Female small business owners in alternative healthcare in California. Okay, now we added that. And even more so, we could say our ideal clients are female small business owners in alternative healthcare businesses located in California who have been in business for more than 5 years. If you have that defined idea of who it is you're talking to, you can really research that person and identify with them through what you say, through how you look, and you'll have a much better chance at attracting the right people. I think you can see that that is why your ICA is so important in your brand. So now we're going to move on to the next part of the brand. This is one that you probably think, of course, this belongs in your brand. And that is words or messaging, what you say. So now we've got what you value, what you sell and to whom, and what you say. So I don't think I need to convince you that your words and your messaging are probably important and belong in your brand, but sometimes it's a little bit more than we think of right off the top of our head. So words and messaging in your brand include the name of your business, your tagline or your slogan, if you've got one, your mission statement, your 30-second commercial or your elevator speech, the voice message you leave on your phone, the email signature you have at the bottom of your emails, any narrative on your marketing collateral that you have at all, anything that you have to say goes into this piece. What you say is essentially your brand promise. That's what people can expect when they do business with you. And you will see in another one of our pieces of the pie coming up how this ties in, and it's so critical. What you are saying in your messaging is promising someone, when you do business with us, this is what you can expect. Now, when you're developing your words and your message, you want to always keep your ideal customer avatar in mind. That's why we just went through that exercise of having as narrow a group as possible. And it's not just the content, it's the style and the vocabulary and all of those things that you learn about your ICA that you can transfer into your messaging. And remember, the spoken word is just as important as the written word. Consistency is also very key. So I've got a little example here, and you might recognize BP, British Petroleum's logo here. And most of us remember back in, I believe, 2011 was when the Deepwater Horizon explosion happened. And there was a great catastrophe, loss of life, great damage to the environment. British Petroleum was called to the carpet on many occasions in a lot of areas. And this is a picture of Tony Hayward, who was the CEO at the time. And this is one of the quotes that was taken out of a video that he did. And he said, quote, "There is no one who wants this thing over more than I do. I'd like my life back," unquote. Now, this little sound clip was obviously pulled from a greater interview. He said something before this sentence. He said something after this sentence. And I don't know particularly what those things were, but if all I heard or was shown was this quote, that doesn't make BP look very good, does it? So if you're thinking of their words or their message, all of your representatives that are speaking on your behalf, that also goes into your messaging and is considered part of your brand. And you can see where this can be very damaging. Obviously, he's not the CEO anymore. But that tells you how important the words and messaging are. Now we're going to move on, and this is the one piece where you probably feel really comfortable thinking this is your brand, and this is images, what you look like. So now as we're building this whole brand, we've got what you value, what you sell and to whom, what you say, and what you look like. Now, your visuals and images include all these things: your logo, your business cards, your website, any photography or video that you're using, your color palette, whether you choose a color palette on purpose or it happens to develop by accident over time, it becomes your color palette and people will associate that with your brand. Any marketing collateral that you have for people to see, brochures, ads, catalogs, graphics you used for trade shows, templates for your email newsletter, all of these things that people look at are part of this piece of the pie. It's important to realize your logo is not your brand. A lot of times when we're working with designers to create a logo, they say, I can help you with your brand. Now, they certainly can help you with your brand, but they are helping you with this visual identity, and it is bigger than a logo. Now, when you're working on your logo and your visuals, many times people will ask, is it really important that I have custom logos created? There are sites, I don't have a lot of money, and there are sites like Vistaprint and other places where I can order business cards and they'll look just fine. And I would say, yes, they probably do look just fine. Now, one of the reasons that I'm going to show you here in just a second is you might want to use this template for your business cards. This is actually a business card from a tailor. It looks fine. They put a picture in that shows what they do. They've chosen a particular color. Well, the interesting thing is this is a real business card too, same town, but it's from a doggy daycare center. So even though they're a little bit different, they have the same look and the same template. It's like when you use a stock photo and you see it someplace else. It's just not yours. You don't feel like you own it and you don't want it to be associated with somebody else. So that's why I would say when you can, there's always a time and place for using certain services, but when you can, have something that's custom to you. It will help brand you. The reason that visual identity is so important is there again, going back to your ICA, it helps resonate with your ICA so that they can feel like, ooh, they really get me. This could be a fit. You also want to make sure that your visual identity is the same across everything that you do. You wouldn't want to use cartoon superheroes on your website and then serious photography in all your emails. So having a consistency to your brand helps people realize it's you. You also want to make sure that your visual identity aligns with your core values and your messaging, those other pieces of the pie that we've already talked about, because all of this together is helping tell your story. It's that big story again, right? Okay, now we're finally to the last piece of the pie, and this is customer experience, what others say. So your whole story, your complete brand consists of what you value, what you sell, and to whom, what you say, what you look like, and what others say. Now this piece is probably the biggest piece of the pie that people say, well, how come that's in my brand? Isn't that customer service? Like, I get it, it's important, but I don't know why it's in my brand. The reason it is so important is because of a little thing called brand congruency, which I coined this phrase because I was thinking about back in geometry days, if you can remember, you talked about congruent triangles. Well, what are congruent triangles? They're the same. So congruency means the same. And if we talk about what other people are saying about you and what you're saying to them, those things need to be the same. What you say and what you're promising need to be the same thing they're experiencing. And if those two things are the same, you have brand congruency and you're golden. I think this is one of the biggest indicators of business success is if you are aligned. If what you say and what they say does not match, I call that a brand disconnect, and that could mean that you're in trouble because people are not, what your brand is promising is not indeed happening, and they will be telling other people about that. So another reason customers' experience is so important is because you may think you own your brand, and legally you might own some of the pieces of it, but you really do not control your brand. Now, does it really matter? Well, it can matter quite a lot. I do not know if you're familiar with the YouTube video of a song that's called United Breaks Guitars. And although this story is getting a little bit older, it's still such a good example that I will continue to use it. This picture of this guy right here, Dave Carroll, is a musician. He was flying on a United flight and had to check his guitar, and they ended up breaking his guitar. Well, as you can imagine, he was pretty upset. He filed a grievance with customer service. They pretty much blew him off. And over the course of, I believe it was 9 months, he talked to someone and then their supervisor and then their supervisor and tried moving this claim up the chain. And after almost 2 years, he got no satisfaction whatsoever. And he told them, I'm a musician, I'm going to write a song about this experience. So he warned them it was coming. They obviously did not care. So he wrote the song. This video went viral, and I am going to show you a little snippet of it. Let's take a quick listen. I will share my screen and we will watch just a minute of this.
United Airlines on my way to Nebraska. The plane departed Halifax, connecting in Chicago's O'Hare. While on the ground, the passengers said from the seat behind me, my God, they're throwing guitars out there. The band and I exchanged a look, best described as terror, at the action on the tarmac, and knowing whose projectiles these would be. So before I left Chicago, I alerted 3 employees who showed complete indifference towards me. United breaks guitars.
Okay, we'll stop it right there. Feel free to go and listen to the rest of it if you'd like to. And now we will go back to our PowerPoint and finish up. So as you can see, what your customers think of your brand is really what happens with your brand and gets shared. So you want to make sure that what you're saying is what they're saying, the same things, brand congruency like we talked about before. And United Airlines certainly had a lot of feedback and fallout from this. So now we're back just to the branding pie, and you can see all the pieces. Now you know what goes into making the story and your complete brand, what you value, what you sell, and to whom, what you say, what you look like, and what others say. So I would ask you, what's your story? Figuring out the pieces you need to work on is important, and it helps you have your brand ready for your marketing. So thank you for your time. If you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Facebook or Instagram at Marketing Troubadour, or I am on LinkedIn as Lori Dubois. I appreciate you listening. I hope if this is helpful that you will share it with a friend, and happy marketing.